Hello, kids. How are you? Good to see you on April 9th. It is April 9th. It's a Thursday. That is garbage day in the Shropshire house, just so you know. So the garbage is out, and we're very happy about that. These are the things we look forward to during the COVID era. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to work through, we got through World War One. By the way, I saw a lot of work come in over the last couple of days, and I'm very happy about that. You should be very proud of yourselves for staying with it. We know it's not easy. We, the teachers, know it's not easy for you all to keep up. There's a lot going on, a lot of distractions out there. So to see the work keep coming in like this is really very encouraging. So thank you for that. All right, so backing up now, we're going to go into this era called the Roaring Twenties. That's going to be our new kind of mini unit we're going to do here. But let's back up a little bit and talk about where we've come from so far. In the 1800s, back here with the blue, in the 1800s was an era of American expansion. We left those colonial states on the East Coast and started moving west. That idea of manifest destiny convinced Americans that they had the right, the God-given right, to move from sea to shining sea. Louisiana Purchase, the Gadsden Purchase. We picked up a lot of land after the Mexican-American War, and were able to then fill out what became the continental United States, from New York to California. And that era bled into then this era of American imperialism. We didn't want to stop at the coast. And so we also wanted to start exerting ourselves on the world stage, competing with the major imperial powers like France and Russia and Great Britain. And so we expanded, and we got involved with Spain in the Spanish-American War. We tried to liberate, or we did liberate, the Cuban people and the Puerto Rican people, people of Guam, the people of Philippines. We annexed Hawaii for ourselves. We helped Panama secure its own country, and then we got to dig the Panama Canal. These are all imperial efforts that we thought we deserved to do and get involved with. Then in 1914, however, as you see here, we have World War I is right here. Everything shuts down in 1914. And the world is totally focused on World War I, kind of like it is today. Everything is kind of shut down now, and we're all focused on defeating this coronavirus. But that happened in World War I. And then finally that ended in 1919. The peace was signed in 1919, and we'll get into what happened next in a second. Throughout this whole period, you'll see this red area here, this progressive era was also happening. And that was progress for people who were disadvantaged, who were poor, who had bad living conditions. We wanted to break up the trust to help the American consumers. We wanted to clean up food production. We talked about Upton Sinclair and the jungle and the meatpacking industry of Chicago. We wanted to improve how people live. We talked about Jacob Riis exposing how the other half lives. We wanted to eliminate child labor. We wanted to improve the civil rights of African Americans and women in America, particularly during this period of time. Now, we've also heard about, on the far right side, we've heard about the Great Depression. That was the market crashed in 1929. We went into this Great Depression where people were on food lines, they didn't have jobs, and they were desperate. There was a Dust Bowl, and there was this just this general global depression that occurred during the 1930s. What we're going to focus on, though, is this period right here in the middle, the Roaring Twenties. The Roaring Twenties was an American age, a global age of incredible prosperity and wealth. People were working, people had money, people would buy things like cars and refrigerators and stoves and sewing machines, and they would go out for vacations, and they would go out on parties. They had more idle time. The world was at peace for this 10 years, primarily at peace for this 10 years. So it was an amazing, very productive time, not just in America, but in the entire world. And so what we're going to talk about for the next 3 or 4 days is the Roaring Twenties. All right, and particularly the themes we're going to talk about are productivity. Factories are producing a lot of materials for Americans to buy. In those factories, you have American workers. So, of course, those workers are getting paid. So they're incredibly prosperous. They have money. We have the progressive ideas, which continue through the 1920s, particularly with regards to women's suffrage, improved opportunities for African Americans. And then the idea around prohibition, which alcoholism was a terrible problem in the United States at this time. And so we actually ended up prohibiting the use of alcohol. And then there are possibilities for new lives, particularly for African Americans as they left the South and migrated to cities like Chicago and New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco. The first thing we're going to talk about is prosperity and productivity. All right, cars were being made. This is the first real era of massive car production. Henry Ford perfected this assembly line process for creating automobiles. And that what that allowed him to do and his factories to do is make a lot of cars very inexpensively. And so the cheaper the car is, the easier it is for more people to buy. And as people are working in his factories, they're making money, so they actually have money to buy these cars. So automobiles was a major, major industry. Ford is the one you see here, but General Motors is also in America. But then you have Audi in Europe, you have BMW in Europe, you have Mercedes-Benz in Europe. These are all major, major automobile manufacturers that are taken off during the 1920s. Airplanes is a whole new industry comes up around airplanes as we start getting into the era of air travel. We start going from coast to coast. On the right side here, you have this gentleman, Charles Lindbergh, makes his first transatlantic flight. He crosses the Atlantic Ocean for the first time. And these planes are being made by this assembly line strategy. You can make a lot of planes relatively inexpensively, which makes it more accessible for regular people to take flights across the country. And we have other kinds of new technology. You have a washing machine, you have a refrigerator, things like the radio, and people have money to buy these things. So again, they're being made on these assembly lines so you can make them cheap, and they can become then more affordable to the people who are then working on those assembly lines. So we're going to get a couple definitions down here for this unit before we get too deeply into it. And I'm going to super simplify what the American and the global economy is and made up of. And to do that, we're going to break it down and to say the economy is made up, how we make money is made up of two groups, consumers on the one side and producers on the other. All right, so consumers, that one group of people over here, those are actually people. You and I are consumers. We consume stuff, talkies, Netflix, shirts, cars, Adidas soccer shoes. That's the stuff we buy. We eat it, we use it, we consume it, we take it in. Now, consumers are pretty much made up of workers and or people in the home, homemakers. So workers, these people here, these factory workers, they are people, they would be consumers because they're going to get paid in the factory and they're going to use that money to go home and buy stuff for the home. Now, on the other hand, we have homemakers are also people. Here's a woman. Now, she's not getting paid, but presumably her husband, and in some cases it's 1920, so it's not quite as prevalent as today. But in some cases, she's getting paid, and they're going to be in the home buying things they need for the home. You'll see she over here, she has a refrigerator here. She has appliances on her countertop. She's a clock here and a telephone. All right, so we have consumers are the workers and the people in the home. And then also when they leave the home, these consumers also go out and they consume fun. They go out and they have dinners and they go on vacations. And here we see these girls are what became known as flappers. It was a definite style where these girls were emboldened and they were empowered and they had the money to leave the home and go out and have a party, go to dinner and go out for drinks and go to movies and go to the beach and do things like that. And all those things support our economy. Those consumers, these people, the workers, the people in the home and the people in the marketplace are out buying and consuming stuff. The other part of the economy is made up of then producers. So producers are the companies that make stuff. So these are companies like Ford. They produce cars. We all know Ford today. They produce cars. These companies have factories in which people work. So they hire workers to work in their factories. And when you go to work, you presumably get paid. So these companies pay these workers from the factories. And then they go home. These are other companies that were big companies in the 1920s. AT&T, you'll see AT&T. All right, the Bell system, but this is the telephone company of the day. You have General Electric, GE, that's a G and an E. They made appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, irons, sewing machines, whatever it was. There was a products you were used and you would buy in your home, all made in factories in America, factories that hired and paid workers. We also simple things, and things we don't really need but we love, like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, or these foods and these treats we'd buy for ourselves, all made in factories by people. So together, that is what the economy is. It's made up of these consumers and of these producers. So the assignment I'm going to assign you is I'm going to ask you to kind of understand and articulate your understanding of the relationship between producers and consumers and producers. Now, in the middle of the screen here, we have this cycle, which means it goes around and around, and it never stops. Let me get in here. Around and around, and it never stops. So it doesn't matter where it starts. It doesn't matter who goes there, because each member of this cycle supports everything else. Here you have a Model T car. So Ford invented or mastered the production line, and he was able to make Model T cars very inexpensively, so people like you and I could afford them. So I'm going to show you kind of how this builds. I tried to explain it on the phone call, but let's take a look at this right now. And you're going to see you can start with any of these 5 from any position, but it's the order that makes the most sense. So here we'll start here with the producer. The producer is the factory. Now they'll say the factory does make cars. And if they're making a lot of profit from making cars, if they're making a lot of money making cars, they're going to want to produce more cars. So if you started here, the producer makes profit, well, then the producer is going to decide to produce more cars, produce more stuff. Now, these factories are large factories. And so you can't just produce stuff out of nowhere. You need people to help them manufacture the stuff. So if the producer makes a profit and they want to produce more cars, they have to hire more people to put those cars together. So the producer needs more jobs. Producer makes the money. They're going to then want to produce more. Demand for jobs goes up. And then that shifts over to you and I, the consumer. If the Ford factory needs people to work, they're going to hire those people. And now those people, those consumers, they're going to have more money in their pocket. They're going to be more people working. They're going to have higher wages because the demand for jobs is going up. So as the demand for jobs goes up, wages for the consumers working in those factories goes up, unemployment goes down, and then, like we all tend to do, when people have money in their pocket, they spend that money. They consume stuff. They consume cars. They consume, I'm trying to think back then, sewing machines. They consume Coca-Cola. They consume the dresses. They consume shoes. When they have money, you tend to spend money. And then it goes all around again. If the consumer, the people are spending money, the producer of those products is going to make more money, will be more profitable. A producer that's more profitable will want to produce more of whatever it is he or she's making so she can make more money. So profit goes up, production goes up. To produce more stuff, you got to have more people working. So they need people to fill those jobs. And when those jobs get filled up, the consumer, then the people are at work. And it goes around and around and around. This is a difficult concept. But once you get it, you'll see A goes to B, goes to C, goes to D. Keep going around and around and around. So what I'm going to want you to do is to articulate this in a written sentence. All right, so we're kicking off our 1920s unit. We're going to try to do it in 3 or 4 days. Talk about productivity, talk about profit, talk about partying, talk about prohibition, talk about progressive ideas, and talk about new possibilities for Americans. All right, keep up with the work. Encourage your friends to do the work too. It's important that we show that we can kind of stay academically engaged in these times that are really very, very difficult. All right, take care, guys.